Okay, we're in Genesis chapter 25, verse 19. Genesis 25, verse 19. Yes, I'm going to practice speaking loud and slow because I know Robert has that low voice, so those of you who are used to his class, it might be hard to hear my voice. It's in a different range. So I'm going to try to give you the benefit speaking loud and
Grab something and beat it on there.
Okay, we are in Genesis chapter 25, starting at verse 19. If you have not been in our class, we began at the beginning of Genesis, and we've been reading through the text, and we're just now at chapter 25, and we are in the section, we're just coming up to Jacob and Esau. So we've studied about Abraham, and then Isaac. Now Isaac is a 40-year-old man, and he has kids. He gets married. In our last section, you remember that Abraham sent to his brother Laban's family to get a good wife for Isaac, and that wife came down, and Isaac was a 40-year-old young man living in his mother's tent. We decided that Isaac was not he was kind of a, what do you want to call that, John? Yes, a late bloomer. Let's call him a late bloomer.
That's a nice way to say it.
Yes. Isaac was a late bloomer, married at the age of 40, and didn't even go find his own wife. His father went and picked out the person and brought it back to him.
Out of the house some way.
And we did, when we end, it said that he was doing better, that it helped him get over the grieving of the loss of his mother. So he was a nice young man, but still. So now things are beginning to focus on Isaac. We're going to learn something about Isaac today. Verse 19. This is the account of Abraham's son, Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Padan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Now remember that Isaac married someone up from Haran, where his father and brothers had been. So they were from his own clan, his brother's child's child. So they're related, and this is a good thing. That means they're not marrying from the girls that are local, because who would be the local girls? The Canaanites and the Hittites. And what do we know about the Canaanites? They were renowned for their idol worship and for sexual practices. That's where the city of Sodom and Gomorrah was, right there at the base of the sea, right? So it's there. It was known for that. So when he sends to go get a wife, he's sending for someone that has the same faith, the same background, the same, instead of the Canaanites, which were different. In fact, we'll learn, I'll remind you later, because this is going to come around to bite us in the story again later on, but I'll remind you that you have Ham, Shem, and Japheth were the sons of Noah. What was remarkable about Ham? He's the one who violated his father, uncovered his father, or violated his father, right? So Ham is the patriarch of the Canaanites. Yeah, just so you know. Okay, so now we're in verse 21. Isaac prayed. Bum, 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 bum. Isaac's going to do something. Until now, has Isaac done much of anything? No. He's been his father's son. He was going to be the sacrifice, but he got away from that situation, right? He waited in his mother's tent, and his father brought him his wife. Has he done anything? Well, I'm sure he's been doing stuff, but we have no record of anything until now. And what does he do? He prays to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. Wait a minute. Do we have like the same story going on again and again with every generation? Right? So he's praying because Rebecca, the wife that came to him from Padan Aram up there where the family was, she has been barren. So the Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebecca became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. They did not have sonograms to say you're having twins, right? How would you know that you were having twins? You'd see more than one elbow or more than two elbows and go, wait a minute, this is like a third elbow. What's going on here? You would feel uncomfortable, right? You'd be extra large, but you wouldn't know. You would just be by conjecture. Verse 23, the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. So keep that in mind, because when we get the end of our lesson today, we're going to see this coming true. Verse 24, when the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. Esau would be like naming him Harry. Esau's hairy. So he was a hairy little guy. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Now the word Jacob actually means heel or crooked or deceiver. Of course, you wouldn't name your little baby deceiver or trickster or crooked, right? It was meant to be heel. But heel was also what they used to describe a person who was a little tricky or a little bit of a crookster kind of a person. Not like an outlaw crook, but like, he can walk the fine lines there, right? So, okay. So Esau was, Esau, later he becomes we see him called Edom. Edom means red. Esau means hairy. And so Edom had red, hairy hair all over him. And so he becomes the father. Esau becomes the father of the Edomites. Kind of a red-headed people there. With his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to him. So how many years had she been barren? 20. He was 40 when he got married. So 20 years later, they have the twins. So for 20 years, it's just been him and Rebekah. Verse 27. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man, staying among the tents. Now, who stays among the tents? The girly man, right? The one who's best friends with his mother. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, okay, even if that was true, would you ever speak that or write that down? No. So this is a problem. You can see the problem dynamics in the family already, right? Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." So what he's really, the actual words are, let me gulp down some of that red stuff. Because he's so hungry. That is why he was also called Edom. Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." Now Jacob's just sitting there making stew. He's in the tent with where the women are hangs around there, and he's in the tent making some lentil soup. And his brother comes in, and he just says, "Oh, well then, sure, you want some of my soup? Then sell me your birthright. Give me your birthright." Here's the problem. Not so much that Jacob said that, but look at this. "Look, I'm about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. This is in the Bible. This is the way, this sounds like my boys. Right? They grow up and they don't consider what's important, right? They're so hungry, just sell my, I don't care about that birthright. For God, what does God think about that birthright? God is the one who's made the promise that the nations are going to be blessed through Abraham all the way through this, right? This is the lineage. The birthright is the lineage that Christ has created, this promise that God has created that leads to Christ. This promise that Abraham and Isaac and all have been passing down from one generation to the next. And now the oldest son, the one who this would go through, says, oh, I'd rather have some red stew. Give me that red soup. I want some soup. I'm so hungry. So what does this say about Esau's understanding of the importance of that birthright? No. But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore an oath, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. In other words, this is how God sees it. Esau despised his birthright. He thought of it as nothing. He gave it away for a bowl of lentil soup. Chapter 26. I'm glad you're shaking your head, Eve. Because the question I'm going to ask at the end of this is, why is this even in the Bible? I mean, we all have family dysfunctions. Do you write them down for posterity to read about in the future? No, you don't. You keep them to yourself. But here we have it in the Holy Scriptures. Chapter 26. Now there was a famine in the land besides the earlier famine of Abraham's time. In other words, this is another famine, not the same one as before, a new famine. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Remember, that would be kind of on the way to Egypt, that area that Abraham met Abimelech in, that area. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, do not go down to Egypt. Now, he was headed on the way to Egypt because that's what Abraham did. He headed on down to Egypt and he stayed there. That's where the area was green and water was there and you could flourish even in a famine time, right? So Isaac's being smart, moving his family on down there, or at least that's his plan. But God says, no, live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you and will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham. Now, does Isaac even know that Jacob and Esau had this thing over the birthright? We don't know. That potentially is not known by Isaac. But here we have again the statement of the promise that's going to be true for the one who inherits it. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and will give them all these lands, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because Abraham obeyed me and kept my requirements, my commands, my decrees, and my laws. So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, we're going to have to slap that man. What is the deal here? Again, that's right. She is my sister. Because he was afraid to say she is my wife, he thought, the men of this place might kill me on account of Rebekah because she is beautiful. Brother, here we go again. When Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from a window and saw Isaac caressing his wife Rebekah. So Abimelech summoned Isaac and said, she is really your wife. Why did you say she is your sister? Now, just in passing, remember when we talked about the sin of Ishmael back in the day, when they said that Ishmael had teased or taunted, or I forget the actual word, Isaac at the weaning party. They're having a weaning party, and Ishmael there was a word they had used for, like taunted.
Is it at the S-A?
Yeah, Sia. And so he had teased him or taunted him, as the way it was translated back in that other passage. But this passage is the same word, and in this case it's touching in a way that they knew that they were married. So that's why we look back, when we look back on this situation with Ishmael and Isaac, some people say, well, that seems kind of harsh that they send poor old Ishmael out to the desert with his mom, with Hagar, and all he was doing was teasing the little one. Well, that's the same word. So just so you know, some people don't know that it was just a taunt or a tease, that there might have been more to it than that.
Yeah.
Okay? But anyway, this is the same place we came to before. That's the same word. Isaac answered him, because I thought I might lose my life on account of her. Isn't that what his father had said? Abraham did the same thing. Verse 10. Then Abimelech. You know, I'm liking Abimelech. Are you liking him? The more I read about Abimelech, the more I like him. Then Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the men might well have slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So Abimelech gave orders to all the people, anyone who molests this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year they reaped 100-fold, because the Lord blessed him. The man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. He had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. So all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the same time of his father Abraham, the Philistines stopped up, filling them with earth. So if you get a picture, what this is saying is that Isaac is fulfilling the promise. The promise says he's going to prosper in the land that he stays in, that God told him to be in. So he's staying there and he's prospering. So much so that the Philistines are getting a little worried about it. And they're going back to, whichever well he's not using at that time and filling it with dirt just to try to move him along, move him out of our land. Because there's only so much water, there's only so much land. So if you see one person getting powerful with flocks and sheep and herds, the other people are going to start getting nervous and saying, let's distance ourselves from them. Verse 16. Then Abimelech said to Isaac, move away from us. You are become too powerful for us. So Isaac moved away from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Isaac reopened the wells that had been dug in the time of his father Abraham, which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham died, and he gave them the same names his father had given him. Isaac's servants dug in the valley and discovered a well of fresh water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen and said, the water's ours. So he named the well Esek, which means dispute, because they disputed with him. When they dug another well, but they quarreled over that one also, so he named it Sitnah. That means opposition. He moved on from there and dug another well, and no one quarreled over it. He named it Rehoboth, which means room. There's enough room. Saying, now the Lord has given us room, and we will flourish in the land. From there he went to Beersheba. That night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and will increase the number of your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. Isaac built an altar there and called on the name of the Lord. There he pitched his tent, and there his servants dug a well. So you might say chapter 26 is about Isaac digging wells. But the symbolism is that at the beginning of the chapter, God refreshes the promise with Isaac, that the blessing that's going to come through his generations. So now in 26, he's owning it. He's building wells in the desert, in a place he thought he needed to go down to Egypt to flourish. He went down to where Gerar was. That was what he was doing, kind of get someplace where he would flourish. And God said, no, stay in this land. This is the land where you will flourish. And so then he says, okay, so Isaac believes the promise of God. Did Esau believe the promise? Esau switched the promise for a bowl of soup. Does Isaac understand the promise? Yes. Isaac believes it and understands it, and he's acting on it. He's building wells in the desert, and his crops are flourishing. His flocks are flourishing, so much so that the people around him are getting really nervous. So the difference is Esau would give up that birthright for nothing. Isaac believes it and is acting on it. Verse 26. Oh, I'm sorry. Back up to 23. After this morning's sermon, did you catch this? That night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. So if someone says, if I say, John, don't be afraid, what am I saying? He's afraid. He was afraid, right? I wouldn't come up and say, John, don't be afraid if you weren't already afraid, right? So God is saying to Abraham, or to Isaac, don't be afraid. Why? Because Isaac's getting nervous. He's putting in these wells. People are getting kind of mad at him. He's not exactly the outgoing kind of character, would you say? I'm sorry, verse 26. Meanwhile, Abimelech had come to him from Gerar with Ahuzah, his personal advisor, and Phicol, the commander of his forces. Okay, wait a minute. Abimelech, who's very powerful in the area, told him, hey, move away from us a little bit, right? He comes to see him, and he brings along his lawyer and his commander of the armies, the commander. So is that good news? If you were growing, if your family was getting bigger and bigger, would you want Abimelech showing up with the commander of his forces and his attorney? No, that would be a little scary. But what happens here? Isaac asked them, why have you come to me since you were hostile to me and sent me away? In other words, hey, you got upset and I went away from you. So what's up? He's a little worried. Verse 28, they answered, we saw clearly that the Lord was with you. So we said, there ought to be a sworn agreement between us. Between us and you. Let us make a treaty with you that you will do us no harm, just as we did not molest you, but also treated you well and sent you away in peace. And now you are blessed by the Lord. So what are they saying? We want to make sure we have an agreement here. Remember how good we were to you, how nice we just kind of sent you along your way. We didn't do anything to you. We want to get this in writing, that things are going to be good between us. So they're afraid. Verse 30, Isaac then made a feast for them, and they ate and drank. Early the next morning, the men swore an oath to each other. Then Isaac sent them on their way, and they left him in peace. That day, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well they had dug. They said, we found water. He called it Sheba, and to this day, the name of the town has been Beersheba. When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beri the Hittite, and also Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite. They were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah. The Hittites were Canaanites. So Esau married 2 Canaanite women. Jacob has not married anyone yet. How do you think Isaac is going to feel about that? Isaac, who held out 40 years for his wife, who his dad picked out for him from the family, and that was Rebekah. And Rebekah is from that other land, from the land Haran and that area. So they were not pleased at all that Esau chose those 2 wives. So what's happening between Esau and Jacob here? We're seeing the character, the difference in the character, right? Which one's better? Don't vote. I don't know which one's better, but we're really seeing the character, right? We're seeing the character come out. Let's go to chapter 27. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see. Make sure I'm in the right place here. He could no longer see. He called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, my son, here I am, he said. Isaac said, I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Okay, let me reread this. I'm an old man and I don't know how much longer I have. Go get your weapons, your quiver, your bow. Go out to the open country and hunt some wild game for your dear poor father. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me eat so that I may give you my blessing before I die. Okay? So he's on his last breath. He feels like the Spirit is going at him. Verse 5. Now, Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat it, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies.' Jacob said to Rebekah, his mother, 'But my brother Esau, he's a hairy man, and I'm a man with smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing.' His mother said to him, 'My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me.' So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food, just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. Then she handed to her son Jacob the tasty food and the bread she had made. He went to his father and said, 'My father.' Yes, he probably said, 'My father.' My father. Whatever Esau's voice sounds like. 'Yes, my son,' he answered. 'Who is it?' Jacob said to his father, 'I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing.' Isaac asked his son, 'How did you find it so quickly, my son?' 'The Lord your God gave me success,' he replied. That's sad, isn't it? The Lord, your God. It's sad that he doesn't see him as his God, right? Then Isaac said to Jacob, 'Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not.' Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, 'The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau.' He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he blessed him. 'Are you really my son Esau?' he asked. 'I am,' he replied. Then he said, 'My son, bring me some of your game to eat, so that I may give you my blessing.' Jacob brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, 'Come here, my son, and kiss me.' So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, 'Ah, the smell of my son. It's like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness, and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed.' After Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, 'My father, sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing.' His father Isaac asked him, 'Who are you?' 'I am your son,' he answered, 'your firstborn, Esau.' Isaac trembled violently and said, 'Who is it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him. Indeed, he will be blessed.' When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, 'Bless me too, my father.'" Now, before we get too far down here, this is Isaac's feeling about this mistake, right?
Yeah.
But what did we read back here? "Two nations in your womb and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." So before you think that somehow what's happening here is something God didn't have in mind or couldn't fix, it's what God knew would happen. He knew that this was going to be part of what happens here. Back on verse 34. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud, bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me too, my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? He has deceived me these 2 times. He took my birthright, and now he's taking my blessing." Did he trick him out of his birthright? No. So, just so you get an insight into who Esau is. Then he asked, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I have made him lord over you, and have made all his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Do you only have one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." Then Esau wept out loud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, you will serve your brother. When you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck." Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessings his father had given him. He said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is consoling himself with the thought of killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while." Do you remember Laban? Remember when they went to go get the bride for Isaac, and how Laban was kind of we saw his little shyster mode go in their place there? Verse 44, "Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Then Rebekah said to Isaac, so this is what Rebekah's telling this to Jacob, right? But now she turns around and goes to talk to Isaac, her husband. And this is what she says to him. "I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women." Who are the Hittite women? The ones Esau's married, right? "If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living." So she's complaining to him about the Hittite women. Has Jacob married yet? No. So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him and commanded him, "Do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Padam Aram, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel. Take a wife for yourself there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of people. May he give you and your descendants the blessings given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now live as an alien, the land God gave to Abraham." Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Padam Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who was the mother of Jacob and Esau. Now Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and had sent him to Padam Aram to take a wife from there, and that when he blessed him, he commanded him, "Do not marry a Canaanite woman," and that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and gone to Padam Aram. Esau then realized how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father Isaac. So he went to Ishmael, it would be the half brother of the uncle, right? And married Mahalath, the sister of Nebaioth, and daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, in addition to the wives he already had. So what's he trying to leverage for? The estate. They're trying to leverage for the estate. So my question for you is the question I told you at the beginning. Why are we being told this story? What? Is it a warning? An example? I want to remind you who this story is about. Is it about Isaac? No. Is it about Abraham? No. Who is this story about? We've read 28 chapters in Genesis. From the beginning. Esau is all about Esau. From the very beginning, from Genesis 1 until Genesis 28, what is this story about? It is about God and what he's doing here. On the promise that he's building. The promise that he gave through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? This is not about them. They're regular Joe Schmoes, like I felt like I could have named some other names here. Not so much with multiple wives. We don't really have too much trouble with multiple wives, people marrying multiple wives. But didn't you feel like this is like a soap opera? Like
Yes.
people's lives, where so-and-so does this and then they do that. But this story is not about Abraham, Isaac, or Esau. They have all, or Jacob. They've all been faulty. They've all been faulty human beings, just like me and you. This is about what God started in the Garden of Eden to address sin. That's what this story is about. It's about what God is going to do to address sin. Now we're over on the other side of Christ coming. So what does this story mean to us? From their side, it's the promise. The promise through the heritage is going to come through that line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. It's going to come through them. But all along the way, and in the chapters after, we're going to learn how Abraham learned his lessons. We're going to learn how Isaac learned his lessons. We're going to learn how Jacob learned his lessons all along the way. And we're going to see all their mistakes. But God is going to make sure that what needs to happen happens in order to get to Christ. With Abraham, he had to keep getting people away from Sarah so that she would wait until it was time for the promised child, right? There were all kinds of hoodwinks that happened with that. Now in this case, we're seeing with Isaac. Isaac seems to be a relatively passive leader. So God is protecting. Abimelech learned his lesson before and has kept with it now through with Isaac. Otherwise, Abimelech would have come in and conquered them all. So all these things are connected together and showing how God is bringing about his child. Now his child has come. We have forgiveness of sin based on our knowledge of Christ. And yet we have families like this. This scripture is talking to us about the fact that these noble patriarch characters were real human beings living real lives. They had struggles, they had problems, they had things they did not do well. And we are the same way. And no sin, no thing that we're struggling with takes us away from God unless we allow it. Esau despised his birthright. That would be like me saying, oh, who cares if I'm a Christian? That would be despising my birthright. My life in Christ is what gives me salvation. It's what gives me forgiveness. I need to not despise my birthright. At the same time, I have struggles. I know it's a surprise. I know, Dave, it's really surprising for you that I'm not perfect. You don't believe it? So we all have struggles, right? Sometimes things we control, sometimes we don't. Sometimes our son goes off and marries 2 Hittite women. Sometimes our wife does something that we disagree with, or our husband does something we disagree with. So what's the course of action? What is it that we take from this? God is making sure that his promise is true. And we have a job in this world. We have things we're supposed to be doing. What Isaac do? He got busy digging wells. He dug wells. He made his community grow. That's what he began doing. So we have the same kind of task. What's our task look like from this other side, from the other side of Christ? What's our task look like? We have kind of dual things going on, right? We talked about fear this morning. All these terrible things happen. We could get really fearful. We have to put our trust in the Lord. God has given us a commission. Go into all the world and preach the gospel. the good news of salvation. So not only do we need to live lives that are pure and true, better than Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, or Rebecca, better. Let's do better than that. We can do better than that. But we also have a commission to go out and seek and save the lost. What was Isaac's commission? To prosper in the land. He went and built wells and built up, right? Began to build that blessing in his land. Planted crops, did what he needed to do. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to gain ground for Christ. We're supposed to talk to that neighbor. We're supposed to sit down and visit with that friend. We're supposed to encourage those people who get feeble in the Lord, that have difficulty. We're supposed to spread our faith. That's our job. So just like Isaac went out and started digging wells and naming them and blah, blah, we need to do the same thing. We need to go out and find ways to live a godly life ourselves and to get the gospel to other people. And no one, I don't know what your story is like, but this is a pretty bad story. I can't imagine your story is worse than this story. But even if it is, God has a way to bring you to salvation, to bring you to forgiveness. I mean, this is a pretty bad story. And these guys were considered the patriarchs. I think even I could do better than that, better than Rebecca. Right? These were not meant to be the stories of these people. They're meant to be the stories of God who worked through these people. He purposely chose these people because they were lowly. And he's going to make sure we pay attention to what he does, not to these great people. It's not about the patriarchs. It's about how God worked in the patriarchs. And it's not about Eve. It's about how God works in Eve. And it's not about John. It's about how God works in John. When we get done with our life, we're going to be up there with God and say, well, how'd I do, God? And God's going to say what? Well done, my good and faithful servant. Right? That's what we're going for. John?
I'd like to turn to Hebrews chapter 12.
Please do.
Were you going to do this?